You're all set.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Nicholas Bulens. I'm a program administrator at the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, and I'll be presenting on the 2021 grant round of the Massachusetts Dredging Program. So the purpose of today's session is to provide a walkthrough of the round's RFP. Here's the agenda for today's meeting. We'll start with an overview of the program, its background, goals, basic structure. Next, we'll talk about the core program requirements. Then I'll walk you through what you'll encounter when actually submitting an application. Next, we'll talk about the review process and the criteria used to evaluate your proposals. And lastly, I'll share some tips and reminders. We'll talk about other EOHD resources that are specific to coastal communities. And then we'll start the Q&A. So the Massachusetts Dredging Program is the first of its kind in the Commonwealth. It's the first annual competitive grant program with focused funding to support saltwater dredging. While there were programs in the past that offered some funding for dredging, none were dedicated exclusively to dredging, and not all of them were competitive or reoccurring. The program in itself was developed in response to advocacy from legislators, municipal officials, harbor masters, and many others like yourself. The current program is actually a successor program it was a MassWorks pilot round called the Navigational Dredging Pilot Program in 2018. That same year, dredging was authorized as a standalone program through the Baker administration's 2018 Economic Development Bond Bill, which means we are no longer part of MassWorks. We are a separate capital program. The goal of the program has remained the same, however. It's to prepare coastal communities for success in the blue economy. We take a very broad view of what it means to be part of the blue economy. For us, the term encompasses not just commercial activities like fisheries, transportation, tourism, but also quality of life activities, so recreation, public spaces on our harbors, and what we need to make all those activities possible, so namely safe and resilient harbors. The basics of the program it provides one-year construction grants for saltwater dredging in public tidelands. It's administered by EOHD and supports long-term strength and sustainability of the Commonwealth's coastal harbors and thereby the blue economy. We focus on shovel-ready projects that contribute to one or more of the following. These are basically the four elements of the blue economy that I just mentioned. So economic significance, recreational value, public safety, and coastal resilience in a particular harbor. Our inaugural round as a standalone program was in 2019, and since then we have awarded over $11 million for 13 public projects. Over $16 million was leveraged in matching funds. The projects are estimated to remove approximately 385,000 cubic yards of material from 95 acres of public tidelands. To put that into perspective, 385,000 cubic yards is roughly equivalent to 117 Olympic swimming pools. So there's a visual for you. Collectively, the projects are expected to support berth or navigation for over 500 commercial vessels, use of over 5,800 moorings and dockage slips, and the livelihoods of more than 50 harbor-dependent businesses and organizations, including boatyards, haul and launch services, and marinas. So here are the basic who, what, and how much of the program. So who's eligible to apply? All 78 coastal municipalities are eligible to apply with a limit of one application per municipality. So joint applications are accepted, but if a community submits a joint application, it cannot also submit a single application. You can submit single or you can submit joint, but you can only submit one of those for a particular round. What's eligible for funding? Generally speaking, it's any bidding and construction costs associated with the dredging and the disposal of dredged material. These costs are generally reimbursed at a rate of 50% up to the amount of their award. Pre-construction costs like study, design, engineering, permitting, real property transactions, those are not eligible for reimbursement under the program, which is one of the reasons that shovel readiness plays an important role, which we'll talk about later. How much is available? The maximum amount that may be requested is $2.5 million per municipality. So joint applications can request over this amount so long as the request does not exceed the $2.5 million per municipality in the application. Any application may also be considered for partial awards during the review process. So don't think that you put in a large amount and we can't fund that and it gets thrown out, that type of thing, we competitively evaluate it and we do consider partial awards. So match requirement. The grants require a minimum 50% non-state funding match. So match does have to be cash in some sense. It does not have to be just municipal funds, though. You can use multiple non-state funding sources, such as federal grants and private contributions. Pre-construction expenses and in-kind contributions are not eligible for use as matching funds, but we do take them into consideration with the overall assessment of the application. So if you spend costs within the last 3 fiscal years in the application, you're provided an opportunity to explain those costs, what was incurred, and we will take that into the overall consideration. So contracting, sorry about that. Successful applicants will be required to submit documentation of their match that it's been secured. All permits and drawings will also have to be submitted. The anticipated start for grant contracts is July 1st. That's when funding would first be available at its earliest, because that's the start of the next fiscal year. All grant funds must be expended by June 30th, 2022. So a 1-year construction grant in that fiscal year. So shovel readiness is really critical, and shovel readiness is exactly what it sounds like. We ask, is the design fully funded? Are all permits and match funds secured? And is the project schedule realistic for a 1-year construction grant? So once an award is given, these are the grant management requirements. You're required to submit quarterly performance reports. Payments will be dispersed for actual work completed as documented by invoices. You have to pay the invoices up front, but you do have to show them to us in order for us to reimburse you at that 50%. We'll also require other deliverables such as the bid plans and bid tabulation, a copy of construction contract and any change orders, your post-dredging survey to show what was actually removed and from where, and a project closeout. 5% of the award is held for retainage until the project is closed. So submitting an application, they do electronically no later than March 17th, 11:59 p.m. No late submissions will be accepted, no paper submissions will be accepted, and the applications must be typed. So the process is very similar to last year. It's essentially a hybrid model where you complete the application in a Word document, and then you submit the Word document with other attachments through an online portal. Maybe next year we'll be able to have everything just completed in an online portal, but there's this hybrid method right now. So we'll talk about how to go through that process. So the application has 7 sections. Project summary is basically a snapshot of the project. Your harbor profile is where you describe the characteristics, economic significance, environmental justice benefits of the harbor. There's a lot of tables here where you're filling in numbers. Project description is where you give a description of the needs, scope, benefits, shovel readiness of the project. Project cost and funding sources. This is largely a cost table where you input things like the match and you describe where the funding is coming for the match. 5 is your largest of the sections. This is the supporting the blue economy, and you basically detail the existing conditions and anticipated benefits in the 4 categories of the blue economy that we were mentioning earlier. So commercial fishing and boating, recreational boating, public safety, and coastal resilience. It's worth noting here that each applicant is required to choose one of these categories as their principal project goal. So literally on kind of page 1, it asks you to choose one category as your principal project goal, but then you can choose essentially what other goals are served by this project. And you can check all of them off that you'd like, and you can make arguments in all categories to demonstrate the full value of your project and therefore make the strongest case possible. 6 is preparing for success. This is where you got to describe your planning efforts, municipal funds, maintenance plans, any commitments from private partners to the extent possible, extent applicable. We'll talk about that later. And then final is certification of authorization. I want to stress that no signature is required on this. It's just essentially recognizing that you have the authority to submit the application, but you do not have to print and sign. You're just going to be uploading the Word documents. So attachments, the required attachments are a site plan. This should be a satellite image or a nautical chart that clearly identifies the project. So again, showing the harbor, this colored area is where we're digging. Copies of permit modifications approved to date. Anything you have should be submitted, including all the plans and drawings that were approved as part of those permits. So those are in addition to your site plan, not as a substitute for them. Statements of collaboration from any joint municipal applicants. If it's a joint application, you need that letter of collaboration. And the last ones are a letter of commitment from private parties. So you only provide these if you have a private party that is going to be making an investment associated with the project, which should be an additional dredging project, commercial vessels, or harbor dependent jobs. So I want to stress these are not letters of support. These are actual commitments letters promising to invest private dollars as a result of the project. Optional attachments, other graphic documents, maps, figures, photographs are fine. They're acceptable, but limited, but please make them reasonable in number. Be aware that optional attachments are reviewed but not formally evaluated. And in general, no additional attachments should be submitted unless otherwise requested, because you're already submitting quite a lot of documents just with your permits. So here are the basic steps to apply. You go to our How to Apply page, download, read the RFP, and you will also find the application on that page. You're going to download and complete the application as a Word document. Once complete, I recommend that you save the application and all those permits and attachments into a common folder on your computer. There's a labeling system that's in the RFP that essentially tells you how to label and categorize the documents. Please use that because we are receiving a lot of attachments with each application and it's difficult to sort through them. So we want you to use that naming convention that is in the RFP. Then you're going to upload everything by going to a portal that's on the How to Apply page. And once you submit it, you will get a confirmation message sent to you by email that we have received it. All right, so completing your application, this is your Word documents. It's not a protected Word document in the sense that you can't make any edits to it. It's very restrictive, but please do not delete any original text. You're only going to add text in the fillable fields. Fillable fields are kind of pointed out here in the screenshot. You have your gray text field, your check boxes, you have tables, and you have answer boxes that say click here. Answer boxes and tables will automatically expand as you need them. So it's not like you're going to be missing your text or anything like that. They will get larger. Don't feel that you have to expand them yourself. When you actually have completed the application, you have all your attachments, then what you got to do is you got to go to that How to Apply page. There's got to be a link right there. It's there today. And it's going to basically be an online web form that's going to take you through a wizard walkthrough process. Be aware that once you start that process, your application attachments have to be submitted one after another in a single sitting. Unfortunately, there's not the option to kind of save and come back later. It's all one sitting, kind of step by step. Can't upload them now, come back later. Just follow the on-screen instructions. After uploading the application, you can see this kind of screenshot on the right. It'll ask you to upload the application, and at the bottom of that screen, it asks you to select the number of attachments you have. So that way, when you put in that number, that's how many attachments it's going to allow you to upload. So be aware of that. If anything goes wrong, if you ever need to change anything, there's a previous button. You can always go back and that will not erase what you have done, which is good. As long as you don't close out, you're fine. Just always hit that previous and you'll be able to make edits. All right, so some helpful tips to keep in mind. I always like to talk about these because these are really just best practices when it comes to grant writing. So support your statements with examples, numbers, other data when asked or when available. Just remember, not all statements speak for themselves. It really does help the competitive evaluation of a grant application when you provide backup. Complete all sections. I really stress that because we can't evaluate what you don't answer. Remember, there are those 4 different categories in that larger section. Don't feel that because you don't think there's any merit in your project to one of those sections that it should be skipped. Absolutely not. Go through the section, fill in what you can. We'll evaluate what we can and award points where we can. So certainly don't skip a section because you feel it's not relevant. Absolutely complete everything. Provide complete, straightforward responses to each question. So I know a lot of times people feel that there's a lot of repetition when writing. It just is the nature of grants, unfortunately, where you have to ask a similar question often. Be aware that you want to answer for that particular answer box in a complete, straightforward answer, and if there's going to be some repetition across the application, that's okay. There are no word or character limits. Please provide complete answers, but do be mindful of the length. We do not want to read term papers. For ease, applicants may wish to type answers in a separate Word document and copy and paste into the answer box later. So I do recommend that. Again, it's not a locked application, but it is always safer to kind of start narratives in a document that you can change back and forth and then copy and paste later. So evaluation, we have an evaluation committee composed of staff from EOHD, but also the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management, CZM. The committee prepares a list of recommended awards based on the evaluation criteria, which we're going to go into, the amount of funding we have available, and the urgency of need. We also take into consideration the broad and equitable distribution of limited funding across the Commonwealth. And the list is subject to approval by HD Secretary and to ratification by Governor and Lieutenant Governor. All applicants will be notified in writing of an award or non-award decision. So it's not that we leave you hanging. No one gets left hanging. You are all made aware, and regardless of the decision, you are all invited to receive feedback on your applications at the end. So in assessing applications and recommending awards, the evaluation committee will consider and weigh a long list of evaluation criteria which are included in your RFP, but I'm just going to go through them now because these are always really important. So we kind of think of them in terms of buckets. First one is the harbor profile. So we'll evaluate the characteristics consistent with what we call a developed harbor. So a developed harbor, we look for things like berth areas, launch ramps, offloading facilities, harbor dependent businesses, things like that. Characteristics consistent with the downtown or community waterfront. So public spaces, recreational boating resources, that can include marinas, but also maybe nearby restaurants, retail shops, what's the zoning around the harbor, and also benefits for an environmental justice population or a similar vulnerable population. Basically, we want to see that the project harbor is a public resource and is actively engaged in the blue economy and benefiting all populations in your community. That's the ideal. Project description, this is where we'll rate kind of the strength of the project need, the feasibility of the project scope, evidence of your shovel readiness. Under the cost table section, we look to the extent that pre-construction costs have been funded, the demonstration that you achieved the 50% match, or if it's greater, and that those match funds have been secured. Supporting the blue economy, again, this is your largest of all sections, and we kind of look at each of those 4 categories. Be aware that while projects that are strong in multiple categories generally are more competitive, you do not have to be competitive in a certain amount of categories in order to be qualified for it. So you don't have to excel in everything or any set number. Everyone is considered and evaluated. We've awarded grants for projects that had a different principal goal and across the board. So under commercial fishing and boating, we look at the presence of current commercial fishing, aquaculture and shell fishing, commercial boating activities, and the strength of the project support for those things. Recreational boating, keyword here is we look for the presence of a region-wide boating public. So we look at launch ramps, public parking facilities, transit boating accommodations. So seeing that beyond just residents are being served by the harbor, that's ideal. And the strength of the project support for recreational boating and waterfront activities. Public safety, demonstration of an actual or imminent risk to public safety due to shallowing, and the strength of the project support for public safety as measured by either a reduction in that risk or an increase in the responsiveness of emergency vehicles, vessels, and coastal resilience. So this is the strength of the project support for preserving, protecting, restoring, and/or reinforcing coastal resources. So you can think about barrier beaches, wetland resources, water qualities. We ask questions to all those effects. Demonstration of how the dredge material will be beneficially reused if that's applicable, and also demonstration of how the project aligns with the city or town's municipal vulnerability preparedness plan if that is applicable. Last section is preparing for success. Here we look at how the municipality will sustain the benefits of the project as evidenced by things like a dredging maintenance plan, local planning documents, and also revenue from the harbor and waterways related fees. We also look at evidence whether the project will generate private investments in either additional dredging projects, commercial vessels, harbor dependent jobs, and you'd want to provide those statements of collaboration from those private parties. So basically, we want to see that you have been proactive in planning, that you have thought carefully about the harbor's future, and that you are prepared to maximize the benefits of the project. That's the ideal. One thing we really like to see are projects that have an evident potential to catalyze development or add new infrastructure. So a great example of this is what we call piggyback dredging. In a scenario of piggyback dredging, the municipality hires the dredging contractor, a local marina or business uses this opportunity to dredge their own area using the same contractor. That has the benefit of that it immediately increases the economic value of the business, and it also takes advantages of the economies of scale. Another example would be a municipality's intention to expand infrastructure. That could be, for example, the replacement of a dock system while you're doing the dredging, using it as an opportunity to do that, or maybe rearranging your mooring field to add more berths. All of those are considered good things. A few things that we also consider, these are essentially, naturally encompassed by the evaluation criteria, and you will see questions to these effect in the application, so I like to call them out. The total match commitment offered by the municipality, so 50% is technically the minimum. Commitments that go above and beyond that cost share are taken into consideration. The length of time since the project area was last dredged, we take that into consideration. The need for phasing and the importance of the proposed phase. So we do have questions specifically related to, is this the first, second, even third phase of a larger project? If so, why did you have to do that? And why is it important that you do this one as soon as possible? We ask questions on whether you're going to be adding any new moorings or dockage slips. I'm again getting back to that preparing to success criteria, and then the life expectancy of the project and the future maintenance plans. So again, we ideally want to see that the municipality has been proactive and has thought about the benefits of the project, how they'll be sustained, and what that next cycle of dredging is going to look like and how it will be financed. So hitting the home stretch here, so some final reminders are all awards do have to be spent by June 30th, 2022. So that means the construction has to happen and all those funds have to be sent next fiscal year. Do read the RFP in full. I kind of walked us through it through this presentation, but please read the RFP. It has a lot of important information as well as those evaluation criteria, which I recommend reviewing. Again, before you write, remember those are the exact things we're looking for. So when you're writing your questions, be thinking about those and how you're speaking to those in your answers. And then really want to drive this home, complete all sections, provide examples, numbers, other data when you're asked or when available. We can't evaluate what isn't answered. So other resources I always like to point out for communities, coastal municipalities should definitely consult the Seaport Economic Council grant program that's also administered by EOHED. It is a really great program for coastal municipalities. It supports a lot of things. Most importantly, it now supports dredging design and permitting, which is really big, huge. They're doing that for the first time this fiscal year. So if you're a community that doesn't have a shovel-ready project or wouldn't be able to do so for next season and you need assistance with those pre-construction costs, definitely consult the Seaport Economic Council grant program because you have the option now to request funding for design and permitting. It will be competitively evaluated, but at least there's that option. And Seaport Economic Council only requires a 20% match versus that 50% match. So That's a great benefit. Seaport Economic Council also funds municipal harbor plans and designated port area master plans. I really like these plans and I encourage communities to get these. They do a great job showing that you planned for development in your harbor. They also take an inventory of your harbor, and they are a great resource for helping you write not only a future dredging application, but frankly, any future application having to do with your harbor. It's great, the data that it generates. And, if there are other infrastructure needs that you have in your harbor, think about piers, boat ramps, public safety buildings, this is a great thing to look at for design or construction assistance. The next deadline for the SEC grant applications is May 1st, so 2021. Again, so there's a good amount of time before then. If anyone is in that design phase or thinking about that, you have time. Contact information for Ellen Sabula is below. She's the director of the Seaport Economic Council. I recommend getting in touch with her, but definitely click on that website first, and you'll actually be able to see there is a separate grant application for dredging design and permitting. It very much mirrors ours, the construction side of it. So good benefit is that you fill that out. If you're successful, you can recycle a lot of that probably the next round for construction if all goes well. So we're about to move to the Q&A. So be aware that you do not have to ask your questions now in this session. You have another couple of days to do so. We'll accept general questions regarding the RFP electronically through March 4th, 11:59 p.m. You need to send the questions to that email address on the screen. Please put the subject line dredging RFP so we know what to look for. We'll respond only to general questions, and we do reserve the right not to respond to any or all questions. Similar questions may be aggregated and answered by a single response. And once those questions are answered, we'll be posting them on the How to Apply page so everyone does have access to them. Once the questions are posted, we really cannot entertain any questions regarding projects and things like that, but we will be available for technical difficulties with the application up to 5 p.m. on the due date. After that, however, you are on your own. I will only be at my desk until 5 p.m. on that due date, be aware. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. We're going to end the recording now and move to Q&A for those who are able to join and type it in the dialog box. Otherwise, as I just said, you can always send your questions to eohgrants@mass.gov, and we'll be able to entertain those for the next 2 days. So thank you everyone for listening. Kevin, why don't you end our presentation and just let us know when we're ready to go.